When we're reviewing parallel and perpendicular lines, there's a few things that we need to remember. First, with parallel lines are always, let's start with they're never going to touch. So they're never going to touch. Now, with that being said, if they're never going to touch, that means that they have to go up and over by the same amount. Now, a different way of saying up and over would be that they have the exact same slope. So they have the same slope. And then finally, they need to have a different y-intercept. If they had the same y-intercept and the same slope, they'd actually just be the same line laying on top of each other. So they need to have a different y-intercept. This means that they start at a different spot, and then therefore they're going to be parallel and they can never touch. So remember, our slope is always our m value and our y equals mx plus b, and our y-intercept is always our b value. Okay, we'll get to that later. Now, perpendicular lines, they meet at a 90-degree angle. Meet at... So now, with this, the slopes for these, we flip the fraction and we make the sign negative. So the slopes are called negative reciprocals. Oops. It doesn't matter what the y-intercepts are, because the y-intercept could be the same. That's where the two lines could meet. It just matters that the slopes are negative reciprocals. So when we're looking at something like that, an example of a negative reciprocal would be if we had a slope of 1/2, the perpendicular slope would be equal to -2/1. Or if we had a slope of 3, the perpendicular slope, and that sign is just perpendicular line, would be -1/3. We flip the fraction and we change the sign. Okay, if it was negative here, then we would have a positive here. Okay, as long as the signs are different in both cases, that gives us the negative reciprocal. So how do we make the equation of a line? So regardless of what information we're given, the first thing that we should always do is find the slope of our new line. So sometimes we get that by comparing two lines. So if the lines are parallel, they're going to have the same slope. Sometimes you'll be given 2 points where you have to use the slope formula of y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Sometimes you're going to have a perpendicular slope where we have to change the slope to the negative reciprocal. But you always want to find the slope. The next thing you want to do is find your starting point. Now, you might have to do that by subbing into a formula. It might be given in the question, but you need to find your starting point. And then finally, what you're going to be doing is putting the lines into y equals mx plus b. And rearrange if you need to. Whoops. So when we're doing this, you only need to rearrange if the question asks that. You don't want to waste time. So like if I read this first one, it says write the equation of the line parallel to y equals -2x plus 5 and passes through -1 and 5. It doesn't say what form we need it in. The easiest form is going to be y equals mx plus b. So that's the form we're going to write it in. We're not going to waste time putting it into standard form because the question doesn't ask us to do that. So here, when we're looking at this, it's parallel to this line. We know that our slope of that line is going to be -2. So then that's going to mean that our parallel slope is also going to be -2. Those two lines just mean parallel. So we know we now have a slope of -2. We know that we're passing through this point, but that doesn't actually tell us the y-intercept. So we're going to have to do a little bit of work to find that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out my equation, y equals mx plus b, and then I'm going to sub in my slope. That's what I found in the last thing. And I've got an x and a y from this point here. So when we're looking at this, my y is going to be 5, my x is -1, and then plus b. And now I can solve for my b value. So I get 5 equals 2 plus b, and then b is equal to 3. So therefore, my equation is going to be y equals -2x plus 3. I found my slope, I found my starting point, I stated my equation. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing down here, but we have a line that's now perpendicular to this. Well, this isn't giving us the slope because it's not in y equals mx plus b, so we can't just assume our slope is written there. So we need to rearrange this into y equals mx plus b, which we've got -3x, I brought the 3 to the other side, plus b, which should be plus 6, excuse me, and then I've moved my 6 over. So now I know my slope from that is -3, so my perpendicular slope would be, let's flip the fraction, we know this is -3 over 1, so we're going to change it to 1 over 3 and then make it positive. And now it's passing through our 0.52. This was 1, we found our slope. Now we're going to use our equation to find our b value. We're going to sub in 2 equals 1 over 3 times 5 plus b. Now I know I'm going to have a common denominator of 3, so I'm going to change the 2 to 6 over 3. And then we're going to get 5 over 3 plus b. So then b is going to be equal to 1/3. We're going to subtract that 5 over 3 over and get 1/3. That's 2. I've now found my slope. My y-intercept. My slope and my y-intercept in this case are the same, and that's okay. My equation is going to be 1 over 3x plus 1/3. Okay, it doesn't say that it's in standard form, so we don't have to get rid of the fractions. We just have to write the equation of the line, which is exactly what we've done here.